We get trapped into this notion that we're betraying our tradition and our history by doing things differently.
Don Hnatow joins us as we discuss stockmanship, what it is and what it isn't, plus the 3 areas where you and I as ranchers would see benefits to our operation.
There's just an astronomical amount of money left on the table because we don't necessarily understand how to manage the animals properly.
Production just shoots through the roof, and all it costs is just a change in your mindset.
Dave Voth also joins us as we continue deeper into the conversation, and we'll work through the conflict that many think about. Is it worth my time?
Shipping day is a terrible time to find out that you can't handle your stock efficiently. That's the day when you are going to pay the largest amount for not taking the time. You know, this is not magic.
Taking the mystique out of low-stress cattle management. That's on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here with the Working Ranch Radio Show. Good to have you with us on the program today. Don Hnatow joining us as our featured guest. Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to be a great conversation with her. I'm looking forward to that. Also sitting in on that conversation will be Dave Voth. Dave's been with us as a guest before, but you're really going to enjoy the conversation all 3 of us have, so be sure to tune into that. We'll get to that in just a moment. Did you catch last week's show? Dr. Alan Williams with Understanding Ag LLC was our guest as we talked about summer grazing tips. And boy, I'll tell you what a timeless episode, what a timeless show. You can go back and listen to that at any given time, and you're going to pull something out of that. I encourage you to check it out. You can go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, or if you have your own preferred podcast provider, you can do it there as well. Now, the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine is out. For those of you that are regular subscribers, I'm sure you've already had an opportunity to dive deep into a lot of the great stories, articles that are featured in that summer issue. If you don't have a subscription, you can go to workingranchmag.com and get started today, or you can also stop by your local Tractor Supply store and pick one up right off the shelf there. And a shout out to the Tractor Supply store in Rochester, Minnesota, and in Savannah, Tennessee, and in Baldwinville, New York. So there you go. You can pick one up at your local Tractor Supply store. Well, let's get into our featured interview here today. Again, joining us for the first time, Miss Don Hnatow, owner and founder of Cattle Up Stockmanship. Also sitting with us is Dave Voth, who has been a guest here before, but he's with Integrated Grazing Management out of Elko, Nevada. And guys, good to have you here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us, Justin.
You bet. Good to have both you guys on here. Dave, appreciate your help in getting this set up. And Don, I know you've been busy. We've been working on getting this together, and I know you're in the middle of the time of the year where there's a lot of clinics and things going on. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. As we're going to talk today, stockmanship. Later on, we're going to talk about a school that's coming up, a stockmanship school and a ranching for profit workshop that's coming up in July at the Cottonwood Guest Ranch in Wells, Nevada, but we'll get to that later. Don, as we get started out, I know for a lot of folks that probably listen to the show might know the fact that you mentored under Bud Williams for many, many years. And when we talk in the industry for low stress stockmanship and cattle handling, your name comes right to the top. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how you've been able to take what you learned from Bud and bring it into the next generation of ranchers that are out there working on that and doing this and going through this. And I guess, first of all, just, real briefly, maybe your experience with Bud and as you come out of that, we'll get into some of the principles later on, but just your experience in working under Bud.
Oh my goodness. Well, it was transformational in many, many ways, not just in livestock handling, but I actually first met Bud when I was working at a feedlot in northern Alberta, Canada. I was head of the health crew there, and Bud had come to another operation nearby to do a holistic management field day. And my boss saw him and met him there and invited him to come to the feedlot just to visit and look around and see if he had any observations that he could share. And he joked about it years later and said, I came to spend a couple of days and ended up staying 10 years because you guys were that screwed up. And that was Bud, that's just the way he talked. It was I don't even know how to describe it, Justin. The way he looked at things, Bud was clearly a savant. He had an incredible gift with animals, but he also was able to sort of decipher these behavioral characteristics that are very common in all livestock animals and came to understand how to use that to our advantage instead of being in conflict with it all the time. And of course, then that translates into all other areas of your life too, the way you deal with people and the environment and everything else. So I stayed, worked with Bud there for 10 years. And then when he and Eunice moved back to the United States and were on a ranch in North Texas, I moved there to work on that ranch and to spend more time with him. So I spent another couple of years there in a very different environment than what a northern Alberta feedlot looks like. North central Texas is a whole different world. But, what I learned through that is that all of these principles and all the things that I learned from him apply in every context you can imagine, regardless of climate and environment and types of livestock. It applies across all of those things. So I was very privileged, very blessed to have been able to spend the time with him that I did.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into here a little bit later about some more aspect of that. But I want to first start off our conversation here today, just jumping right into stockmanship. And I think, Dave, when we were talking before we went on air, as we were talking about talking points that we were going to have here today, to start off with first is, what is stockmanship and what it isn't? To explain, that difference in that. Definitely for a lot of us that grew up in ranching, myself included, we have definitely seen the evolution of things changing. The concept of low stress cattle handling has definitely become more of a terminology in our industry in the last 20 years, even though it's been going on before that. But I think as far as being part of, whether it's workshops we go to or stock growers events that we go to, and it's being part of that. So to start from that point, to maybe define what it is and what it isn't.
Well, I think probably the best definition that I can share with you was formulated by a fellow named Whit Hibbard, who I'm sure you're familiar with. Whit is an exceptional stockman and clinician. And Whit describes this style of stockmanship as the way that we interact with our animals physically, mentally, and emotionally, which, I think our industry as a whole tends to focus very much on the physical component of that. How do we move these or, make these animals move their bodies to a certain place and do certain things? And what Bud brought to the table was the mental and emotional component of it, which is where all of the good stuff is. Mm-hmm. So I think conventional handling, is based around fear, noise, methods of forcing animals to do things. So it's fear, force, and coercion, which I think may be the most damaging overall. And that sort of centers around baiting animals with feed or with grass whenever you go to try to move them rather than figure out how to do that efficiently. We just, hope they chase the cake truck or hope they'll run through the gate because there's green grass on the other side. It's much less about overpowering and dominating and controlling these animals and much more about establishing some method of communication that they understand. And so because we are the one element in the equation that is supposedly capable of critical thought, it's up to us to figure out what we need to do to have the result that we want, instead of just, trying to force these animals to do something and then blaming them for being too stupid to figure it out. And I think those are, pretty much in my mind at least, the main contrasts. Mm-hmm. It's just, oddly enough, as you practice these things that Bud taught, you gain a lot of control over these animals, but it's mentally and emotionally, not physically. Mm-hmm. You just can get a lot done without a lot of conflict.
Yeah. Don, when you talk about the three components, the physical aspect, the mental aspect, and the emotional aspect, I think we can all in the ranching industry identify with the physical aspect and understanding that. And what really leaves a lot of folks hanging and not wanting to explore any deeper and maybe it's the words, it's what that in their mind, what that transforms to, or they think it's soft, or they don't think it's doing what it wants to do, is when you start talking the mental component of an animal, and then you go one more step, and then you add a word that isn't really, for a lot of us in the ranching, we're not really the touchy-feely kind of folks. And you start throwing the word emotional out, and then you start throwing the word emotional out, talking about livestock, and you got people checking out. How do you get people to check back in on those two aspects, not the mental aspect and the emotional aspect, and get people to buy into that?
Well, I think, if you can convince people that all this conflict that is centered around dealing with our livestock isn't just mentally hard on the animals, it's hard on people too. It's hard on animals emotionally, and it's hard on people emotionally too, whether or not they acknowledge it in the context of the chaos. It causes a lot of problems in families. It causes a lot of problems in communities because people are constantly fighting this emotional and mental battle of how to get these jobs done. And it's not just the animals, it's the people too that have to gain some control over their mental attitude, over their emotions. I tell people all the time, if you want to do this effectively, you must learn to discipline your emotions, because reacting emotionally to an animal does not necessarily get the job done. And we have to learn to read all the signs that they give us that are telling us exactly what it is that we need to be doing, so that they stay calm and so do we. And, I use a lot of video in my presentations because this stuff is it's almost esoteric when you try to explain it without a visual component to it. But, when you watch these animals that are really stirred up and worried, and within 20, 30 seconds, you can just see them relax and calm down. That's all centered around the handler and how that handler is presenting themselves, how they're responding to the animals. So it's all clearly within our control to manage. It's just, like you say, those words seem a little bit daunting, but it's really not that difficult. If I can learn how to do it, anyone can. I don't have any specific talent, I don't think, other than the fact that I disciplined myself. I started paying attention. I wanted to know why these things were happening the way they were and what I could do to have a different outcome. And when I did, it just changed everything.
Mm-hmm. Don, let's take a break here. Dave, let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about, there's a couple of directions. I'm not sure just what we'll hit first, but I want to talk about some of the benefits that you feel is going to come out of this. I think that's one of the ways we've got to get it across to people to understand if they're going to move this direction, here are the benefits, right? And then I want to continue more and talk about your experience with Bud, but more getting into sort of demystifying what he knew and putting into terms some of the things that for a lot of us, we feel that because we're not Bud, we don't see it like he does, that we cannot learn this. It's sort of that roadblock. And I think if you can work us through that, I think that'd be a good conversation to have as well. So we'll do that when we come back.
Okay.
All right. This segment today brought to you by Riomax, the tub that pays for itself.
We've done a few manure studies on the Riomax product. On average, we're seeing 51% less undigested feed in cows' manure that have been on Riomax. She's digesting her feed that much better and getting that much more protein and that much more energy out of her feed stock.
Generally figure about 5.5 to 6 acres a pair. Through the drought of 2020, we did 4.5 acres a pair on ours. Still had adequate grass left.
I guess they utilize more of what they eat, so they eat less.
We were actually able to increase the number of cattle that we were running probably by 30%. With the same amount of grass.
We had a worse drought this year, worst heat this year. Weaned them a whole month earlier. They weighed at least 100 to 150 pounds more this year, and my cows had pones on them. The only thing different is the Riomax tub.
Riomax, the tub that pays for itself.
To learn more, call 888-386-0699 or online at riomax.net. As we continue on here, joining us on the program is Don Hnatow, who is the owner and founder of Cattle Up Stockmanship. Also, Dave Voth is sitting on the sidelines as well. He's going to join us probably here in a little bit. Or again, Dave, feel free to chime in at any point in time. He's with Intergrazing Management out of Elko, Nevada. And so, Don, when we left in the last segment, there was a couple directions I wanted to go. I think let's first talk about maybe some of the benefits of this. And you sort of touched on that. I can't help but think, as you were talking about the fact that one of the words you talked about for helping that we do this for with livestock is the emotional component. In the same sense, it's the emotional component for those of us that are managing or working the livestock as well. And I always find that one of the biggest stresses in my gut whenever we're branding or we're preconditioning is the whole aspect of getting the livestock into the corral or whatever that might be. Now we do things that kind of helps mitigate some of that and some of the principles that I think that you probably do as well. But at the same time, I think I'm not alone in that. I think when guys or gals that are managing their ranches are part of that, kind of the cow boss and the outfit and have to put this all together. And I can remember my father-in-law saying this. I mean, on mornings that they would be gathering, just so nervous they're puking.
Oh, yeah.
Golly.
Yeah.
We must not be doing something right. and I understand, and I don't want to say anything bad against the previous generation, but I think there was so much turmoil in your mind and in your body of just hoping everything went all right. And that's got to be one of the things we're addressing.
Oh, absolutely. Because the first thing we have to understand, Justin, is that the animals sense that anxiety in people. Animals read people a lot better than people read animals. And so starting out with that level of anxiety when you go to gather is really going to set your day up for probably some difficulties. Bud used to say, what you anticipate, you will create. So if you're expecting problems, you're likely to have some. And I know exactly what you're saying. My dad used to start getting mad about 3 days before we'd go to gather. And, morning of, the saddle horses were as far away as they could get. And it took half a day to get them caught. And, it was a rodeo right from daylight till dark. And it is very stressful. So that is one of the very most important components and advantages of doing this stuff, is that it just gives you so much confidence that everything's going to be okay, that you know how to handle every situation as it comes up. And as you are more confident, then your animals become more confident because you're less anxious. And it's just sort of it builds from there. But clearly, that is a huge issue all over, no matter where you go in the country, no matter what kind of livestock you're dealing with. The worry, the fear, the miscommunication between people and animals and people. I promise you, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that at all. It can be really a very enjoyable day.
Okay. All right. So before we get a little further into talking about some of the other benefits of this, I think one of the things, too, that's always tough for a lot of us is just bucking the traditions that what's been done on our place, what our neighbors do, hasn't always been done that way. That's one of the toughest things to overcome.
Yeah, it certainly is, because that's the way it's always been done. And we get trapped into this notion that we're betraying our tradition and our history by doing things differently. But at the end of the day, I think if you look back, and I talked with Bud quite a bit about this, when you look at what stock handlers did when they were moving cattle from Texas to Montana, if they weren't reasonably good stockmen, they never would have made it. I mean, his theory was that we have gotten worse and worse at handling livestock as our facilities have become stronger and stronger and easier to, portable this and that and steel corrals. And he always told me, if you want to test yourself, build your corral out of polywire and see how well you do. That's sort of the stuff that he talked about in terms of how things have changed. He felt like it's gone downhill instead of moving forward just because of those types of things. But, as far as the advantages of the stockmanship, and I know, Dave, I will hope you'll jump in here, the most obvious one is the financial component. Because if you look at what cortisol, the stress hormone, costs in terms of loss of production and all other kinds of things. There's just an astronomical amount of money left on the table because we don't necessarily understand how to manage the animals properly. I don't know if you have numbers, Dave, off the top of your head, but there's quite a bit of research out there now that supports that.
I would say that's how I work around the touchy-feely part. I don't disagree with anything you said previously, but I start with the numbers. It's just so eye-opening when you run numbers to it. If particularly weaning, when you don't have to go mass treat everything and your days are a lot better because you're not out there doctoring all the time. And you talk about something that's become pleasurable is weaning is one of my favorite days now. It can be so smooth. And when it's done right, it is so satisfying. Those numbers are, everything's ranch specific, but one of the easy ones to calculate is just days on feed. If you can get 10 extra days out of your rangeland, you're talking about thousands of dollars per day that even in today's hay market, you're talking about thousands of dollars per day you're saving by just extending your forage outside using stockmanship.
Yeah. And I start there at most of my clinics too, just because it really is the driver. And the thing is, being better at handling your stock doesn't cost anything. Mm-hmm. You have to go do it anyway. To be able to do it efficiently and do it well carries a lot of benefits at no extra cost whatsoever, outside of possibly a clinic or two to kind of get some information about how this stuff works. Beyond that, it's just a matter of practicing and reaping the benefits of it, because they are astronomically high. We saw just an incredible turnaround in that feed yard, specifically with weaned calves and death loss and performance. Just so many things that Bud thought about that had never occurred to us, that dramatically changed the trajectory for those animals when they came in. They didn't go for 2 or 3 days without eating. They ate immediately after they got off the truck. They all went to the water trough and drank. They got exercise. They got taken care of, and they responded by gaining and performing and staying healthy. And, as Dave, as you mentioned, those are fun days. I mean, to take animals that traditionally have been a problem, quote unquote, and set them up to just sail through is, if you enjoy working with livestock, that's a get to. That's not a have to. Mm-hmm. I feel like I get to work with calves like that. That's something I enjoy very much. Yeah.
Yeah. As you guys were both talking about this, and it stems off of this conversation we're having right now and the economic benefits of it, but I think it also umbrellas over the entire topic of what we're talking about here today. And I think we've got, we can break our producers up into 3 settings. There are 3 types: small, medium, and large. And then of course we've got maybe ones that are extra large. But, and I see, the average size, herd size in the country is what, 40 heads, give or take, in there, right? I mean, I never know quite exact the number is. And I wonder, in some ways I see, for small outfits that are in that average size herd, they're like, well, I'm just going to do it this way because frankly, it's easier to handle 40 head than it is, 1,040 head or 340 head. So they can really just, as you said, the corrals enables that, whatever else enables the ability to do certain ways. So I see that size of operation. Maybe are they embracing or willing to look at this because from a financial aspect, they don't care. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they do. And I don't want to be critical of those sizes, because I know there's some folks that are that size that do care. Then I see the large operations that are like, we just can't change up. We just can't change. It's how we've always done it. And is that what you guys see? I don't know. Maybe I just, as you're talking about the financial and the economic and the benefits, and then the entire conversation as a whole, some of them just not maybe finding the value in it from the economic side of it that you were talking about.
Right. Yeah, I do see that quite often. But those people are motivated by different things then. Most of those smaller operations are, especially if it's a family situation, one or both owners are off farm working during the day, And so they have limited time and limited resources as far as, I mean, they rarely have an employee. They're doing everything themselves. So the motivation for them becomes efficiency and time management and just safety, of course, because oftentimes, I've been to several places where a married couple, are running a small farm like that. The husband's off at a day job. The wife is home with a couple kids, and she's charged with taking care of the livestock. And so there's safety issues there. They come to it often for a different reason, but they reap the same benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's more than just the money, clearly, but the more animals you own, the more animals you have control over, the higher the stakes are in terms of the financial part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break here, and I want to continue on talking more about some of the benefits when we start, and you've touched on them just a little bit. We're going to continue on it in terms of production and then even just quality of life, not only ourselves, but for the animals as well. We'll get into that when we come back.
Okay.
This segment today brought to you by Kaline Irrigation, a cost-effective adaptive irrigation solution designed specifically with the grass-based livestock producer in mind.
This year, choose to unlock the full potential of your cattle operation with Kaline Irrigation, the affordable and dynamic solution for grass-based livestock operations. Beat drought by planning ahead with the most user-friendly irrigation system. Kaline systems ensure optimal water distribution across all acres and are unencumbered by obstacles such as fence lines or steep terrain. Don't miss out on untapped pasture potential. Choose Kaline to secure the future of your grazing operation. For more information, visit our website at www.k-linena.com. Be sure to fill out a consultation form so our designers can create an estimate for your project. Kaline Irrigation, for greener, more productive pastures anywhere.
All right, Don, I want to continue on now. We were talking benefits. Dave, I appreciate you coming in there, and we were also talking the economics side of things as well. That's really where both of you had said when you're talking to producers about this, that's kind of one of the areas that you start is the economics and pointing that out. Let's get into the production side, the benefit from the production side. I know you kind of touched on that a little bit, whether it's the cortisol level in the animals, just literally getting them in the right frame of mind to where they just naturally, they're in the point where they're not worked up. And so I think I can't help but think that there's some benefits from the production side. As you said, they're coming off the truck or they're coming off the weaning deal. They're going right to feed. They're going right to water. You talk to anybody that's weaned a lot of calves or messed with yearlings much, anything like that, you get them on feed and water. That is the primary one. That's above anything that you can inject in their body is getting them to eat and going to water, right? And so let's talk about from the production side, the benefit there that you hit on.
Well, that's a multifaceted idea. I mean, we're talking about weight gain. We're talking about breed up. We're talking about dark cutters. We're talking about grading. All of those things are influenced greatly by the way those animals are mentally prepared in each stage of that process. So, at the feed yard, we did everything we knew possible to make those animals experience the best we could before Bud ever came. Mm-hmm. But if you look at what we do, typically it's all external things. Yes, they had good feed, they had clean water, they had a good bedding, they had shelter from the wind, they had all of those things. But if they're so stressed and so mentally beat up that all they do is go stand in the corner with their head down and their butt out and don't eat for 2 days, you're not just losing the weight that melts off their body, you're losing the potential gain. And when you add that over thousands of animals over a year, it's scary when you run the numbers on that. So I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you teach an animal to eat? Well, for heaven's sake, if you bring a 500-pound calf into your yard, I promise you it's eaten before. So we don't need to teach them to eat because clearly they've already eaten before they've come to you or before you've weaned them. The question we need to ask is, why can't they eat? what is happening to them psychologically that they don't feel comfortable or safe enough to go to a feed bunk or to a hay bale or to the water trough. And, when Bud first came to our feedlot, we were aware of that as a problem, that these animals didn't, but we had no idea how do you help them get past that? And it was, it's so simple, Justin, really. It was just the way that we interacted with those calves that changed everything. We didn't change the vaccine protocol, the feed protocol, nothing. The only thing we changed was how we handled those animals. And it just totally transforms their psychological well-being. And I don't want to get woo-woo here because it's, this is not magic. There are specific things you can do. There are specific reasons why it works. And anyone can learn how to do a good enough job that it will completely transform your experience, especially with animals that you feel like are high risk. So it's a matter of rewiring our brain to think more about what is it that makes this animal feel unwell or unsafe. And, if you push that on through to the morbidity and mortality component, which, people focus heavily on, how many do you doctor and how many get sick and how many die, all of that combined, it doesn't even come close to the same amount of money as that we lose in just overall loss of production. Animals that don't gain immediately on arrival, animals that are feeling a bit unwell but don't present themselves because, in nature, if you present yourself as a prey animal that's not feeling well, you're going to die because something is going to get you. So they hide it. They internalize it. They try to disappear in the herd. You don't see them until they're so sick that they can barely move. Then they don't respond. Then you doctor them for, just this horrible snowball that I have lived through, and I know many, many other people have. It's a horrible place to be, but it happens because we don't address those issues as soon as those animals get off the truck.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's really not that hard.
Okay. And we're going to come back to that in just a minute. Dave, did you have something?
To steal from Steve Cody, changing the way we think to rekindle that herd instinct. They like to be together. And now when I'm riding out and I see onesies and twosies by themselves, what happened to that animal to make it think that it's better off to be away from the herd? And when they are together in a herd, man, production, your breed up goes so much better. Your susceptibility to poison plants goes way down. The amount of bulls you need to cover the same amount of cows goes down. That ratio goes down. Just production just shoots through the roof, and all it costs is just a change in your mindset.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Okay, one benefit I want to talk about, we've kind of already hit it. I think when I brought it up and talked a little bit ago about the fact of the anxiety that people deal with when doing this. And that's just, one of the benefits, just, way of life, just taking some of that stress, not only out of the animal, but out of ourselves as humans as well. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, overall, that's the number one issue in the industry as a whole, because it sets up a situation where, like Bud said, you anticipate what you anticipate you will create. So if we start out the day worried, stressed, upset about what may or may not happen, I mentioned before, the animals are very sensitive to that. So that translates to the animals. And then you get this really weird dynamic where even if it goes well, people are still anxious and worried. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we're not just thinking about getting them in that day. We're thinking about how are we going to market these calves? Is it going to be profitable? How are we going to do all these things? If you can discipline yourself to focus on the task at hand, which is to gather those animals and bring them to the pens in a calm, and manageable way, you'll find that all of that anxiety and stress dissipates. I can tell you with certainty, with my own cow herd and my own calves, the day I wean calves is not one bit different to me than any other day of the year. I don't worry about it at all. I haven't for 25 years. There's just no doubt in my mind that whatever needs to be done, I'll do it. And whatever the animals need, I'll give it to them. And in turn, I get what I need and want out of the situation. And it has been literally, I don't know that I've had any issues around weaning in 20 years. And it's only because of that mindset. It's not to say some things didn't go the way I thought they were going to go. What it means is that I didn't lose my biscuits. You just regroup and get your stuff together and know and understand these principles and techniques that Bud taught us and use that to your advantage. And the animals will comply. They will comply. They are not unwilling to do any of these things. They just are unwilling to do it if they're not asked in a way that they understand or told in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not a lot different. What Bud brought to the table with livestock is very much the same ideology around the whole renaissance in horse training that Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt brought to the table, which is understand these animals, understand what drives them, what they're afraid of, what they need from you to be able to do what you ask. It's really very simple. It's not magic. This is very doable for anyone who wants to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
It really is.
So we're going to take a break here. And when we come back, I'm going to have you expand on that, what you just said a little bit more, because I think as we were talking before we went on air, the fact that for a lot of us, I've read the books, I've watched the videos, all this, and I think there's a essence in our mind like, well, I'm not Bud and I don't think I can get it like he did, or I can get it like Don gets it, because so I want us to kind of demystify that, take the magic out of it, and explain that element when we come back.
Okay.
This segment today brought to you by Mansaver Post Driver by Roar Manufacturing, the portable, lightweight, and easy to use pneumatic post driver where the name speaks for itself. When it comes to building fence, driving those steel posts can be exhausting and absolutely backbreaking. But there is another way you could be doing this. Now, I'm not talking about those bulky and expensive gas-powered or hydraulic pounders. What I'm talking about is the Mansaver Post Driver. Yeah, it's called the Mansaver Post Driver by Roar Manufacturing. This is a portable, lightweight, easy-to-use post driver that runs off of any small air compressor and is 100% made in the USA. The Mansaver Post Driver comes in a variety of models, from driving posts ranging from vineyard stakes to T-posts and all the way up to 3.5-inch diameter posts. While it may be called the Mansaver Post Driver, shoot, I've heard some go as far as calling it the Marriage Saver Post Driver. But take a look for yourself. See it in action when you go to their website at roarmfg.com. That's ROHRERMFG.com. Or if you want to talk to a real person, give them a call at 800-980-7599. The Mansaver Post Driver, the portable, lightweight, and easy-to-use pneumatic post driver where the name speaks for itself. As we continue on now, Don Hnatow and Dave Voth are joining us here on the program today. We'll talk about a stockmanship school and a ranching for profit workshop that's coming up in July at the Cottonwood Guest Ranch in Nevada, Wells, Nevada. But before we get to that, Don, one of the things that we talked about this before we went on air, and then in the last segment you were talking about this, and I think let's bring this down to the level and make me as a rancher not feel like this is some magical thing that we have to understand, because I think for a lot of folks, they are respectful of what Bud Williams brought to the industry and what you're doing in the industry now and continuing on what you learned from him. But I think for some folks, they're like, well, I just don't have the time, or I just don't think I can get it like he got it. And as it's human nature, well, if I can't, I just don't want to even try. So what's going to make me want to try besides the benefits that we talked about? But let's kind of pull the magic or the mystic out of this whole deal and bring it down to the fact that it's attainable.
Right. Well, first of all, for those of you who have watched Bud in the videos or heard Bud speak or any of those things, what you have to think about, first of all, is that when you watch him work animals, he is doing very specific things for very specific reasons. He's not just wandering around out there and the animals are, falling through the gate or, jumping on the trailer. So what he did was identify, there's 12 basic behavioral principles that exist in all of these animals, all prey animals, and they're really deep-seated in our livestock animals. So they're innate in every animal. They're very predictable once you understand them, and some of them are very obvious. And then there's some very specific techniques that you can use to use those behaviors to our advantage rather than have them constantly work against us. And that's what happens typically, is that our human instinct, which is predatory, conflicts with their prey behaviors. We do things that make us present to them like a predator, and they react accordingly, which is to not trust us, be suspicious, be worried, reluctant, all of the things that our livestock tends to do. But when you understand these behavioral concepts and the techniques that we use to move these animals, it's very predictable and very learnable. There's nothing about it that was just kind of wandering around out there and hoping things fell together. It's a very specific reason for everything that we do. And it is not difficult to learn. I promise you, if I can learn to do it, so can anyone else. And, had it not been for Bud, I would be in the conventional world still, I'm sure, because these things never occurred to me until I saw them. And then when I did, I really wanted to know what was going on and why that happened the way it did. And so, there's nothing mystical about it. It's all scientifically based if you want to break it down to that level.
I want to add that it's also really fun. And it's very obvious. It's very obvious to have fun, to throw a pretty loop or to split a pair at the gate, but with a big sweeping turn of your horse. But the more I learn about, the less it takes me to do to get the reaction that I want. To me, that gets to be really fun when I can have my horse cock its head one little direction and it gets the reaction I want from the cattle, or for my horse to take one step with its left foot and it gets the reaction that I want. Man, it's really satisfying. It's hard to say it's as satisfying as throwing a pretty loop in a branding pin, but it's pretty satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We talked earlier about the desire to dominate and control our animals. And the way you gain the control is by giving it up, basically. And just, understanding that you have to do it a different way.
Mm-hmm. All right. I do have one more topic that I want to get to. We're going to take a quick break. I want to get to that topic. And then also let's talk about the Stockmanship School and the Ranching for Profit workshop that's going to be coming up in July. So we'll get to that after we take this break. This segment today brought to you by Toad, your remote water monitoring system, all from the convenience of our phone. It's what we've been using here on our ranch settings for a couple years now. Looking to add a well controller this year, all powered there through your cell phone. Keep an eye on your water supply with a daily text message. Call Meadowlark Solutions today for tank monitors, well controllers, generators, and more. Find out more at their website, tanktoad.com, or give them a call at 801-252-6135.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influence females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. This year, make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer genetics.
All right, so one more topic I want to hit before we talk about this, the Stockmanship School and the Ranching for Profit workshop that's coming up, and that's this. The conflict between what you guys were just talking about, the fact that it is attainable. It can be, it's as Don, as you said, it's pretty much kind of science. I mean, there's 12 things we're watching for, we're looking for. They're predictable when you understand that. But you still deal with folks that are just saying, I know, I get it, but I just don't have the time to mess with it. You'd mentioned earlier, as we were talking about the smaller producers and that maybe don't take the time because there are only just a few handful of animals. And so rather than learn some of this, they're just going to go ahead and continue what they've been doing. And the two words that you used was for safety of their, maybe family, efficiency, time management, things like that. People are going to take those words that you just used, and I'm going to push back a little bit here, and they're going to use those against why they would move forward in this. How do you counter that? That's where people, I think, some minds are left at.
Right. Well, the way I would handle that is to say, look, you have unlimited time to fix the messes that occur from mishandling, unlimited time to doctor sick cattle, unlimited time to go through a culling process for your heifers or your cows that didn't breed because they're not handled correctly and things are not going well and they're too stressed. We have all kinds of time for those things. Why don't we make this a front-end loading investment and then put that time in at the front end and reap all the benefits on the back end? Because shipping day is a terrible time to find out that you can't handle your stock efficiently. That's the day when you are going to pay the largest amount for not taking the time at the beginning and all the way through your process. Because the thing is, if you start at the day you wean, actually you should be doing it while the calves are still on the cows, but assuming you're buying calves, if you start that day putting in that little bit of extra time, by the time you get to shipping day, all the work is done already. And there are no problems at the back end. At least at the front end, you have a little bit of time to recoup. If you make a mistake or two, you have some time to get things back together. But if your animals are not predictable, not comfortable, not well adjusted, and you go to gather them on shipping day and you have a problem, like Bud said, nobody's going to walk up to you and slap your face and pull $1,000 out of your pocket, but that's actually what's happening. I don't think you can afford to not do it. Personally, I don't know how, if you figure out what it costs to not do it, to me, it's just, there's no option.
Yeah. So I think where I would be at now, if I'm somebody that's listening to this program here today, they're going to be left with saying, okay, I get it. I understand all that, but you never did once talk about, okay, how do you do this? How do you wean? Or how are you doing these? What are these things? We've not really hit any of that, and we're not going to have the time to do that here today.
Right.
Maybe that's something where we come back on. I've had Steve Cody on a couple times. We've talked with him. I've had Whit several years ago. I'd had Whit on. But so what are the resources? What are ways, if I'm going to treat some people like I am a cow and I want it to be their idea, right? All right. Where can they go to find some resources to start down this road?
I think the very first place I would go is to Whit Hibbard's Stockmanship Journal. And in that journal, I can't remember if it's in the first or second edition, there is it's called the Bud Bible. And it's a collection of, all of the research that Whit did, which is extensive, the most extensive research that's ever been done into what Bud did and said and taught. It's an explanation of all these principles, very good description of the techniques and how to apply them in different contexts. That is a very, very good resource. Of course, Steve Cody's books are very good. Eunice Williams' website, stockmanship.com. That's an interactive website. You can get lots of information from there. Those are the places I would go first.
Okay.
If you're interested in what Bud taught.
All right. So once we've done that, then we sign up for a stockmanship school and a ranching for profit workshop at the Cottonwood in July, don't we?
Yes.
Where you will be, you
great.
and Dave will both be there at that deal. But no, joking aside, I mean, I think, Don, and you didn't really sell yourself in this, and I respect that. You're a huge resource. There's not anybody that's, other than maybe Eunice, that spend as much time with, around Bud and learning firsthand. I mean, there's other people that have in some ways. But so I think you are a resource in our industry as well. Your website is cattleupstockmanship.com. But guys, let's talk about this school that's coming up at the Cottonwood Guest Ranch in Wells, Nevada, that's coming up in July.
So July 10 through 13 in O'Neill Basin, just north of Wells, Nevada. We've hosted this several times. This will be the second time Dawn's come to this one. We're doing a 2-day stockmanship, 1-day ranching for profit workshop. Dawn will be leading the stockmanship side. Myself and Roger Ingram will be doing the RFP side. We will all be there all week, so there's no reason that those ideas can't be commingled all week. You know, as we're talking stockmanship, we can refer back to, how does this affect the gross margin? And that's kind of the idea in combining these things, is we can really, they're integrated, and we're going to try and show that off. And I cannot speak highly enough about Dawn's teaching style. Not only is she probably the best stockman I've ever been around, but the way she interacts with people, it's such a refreshing way to learn. She's clearly very good with people and passing on this information. I know we've probably all been around people who are good at this, but not good with people. Dawn's got both.
Oh, thanks so much, Dave.
And that's Dave. I've heard that as well myself, and I've heard the same thing. So, Dawn, anything on your side of this about this the clinic coming up?
I'm very excited for this clinic, especially to be working with Dave again. And Dave is an exceptional stockman as well. So this is just a really cool integration of both the stockmanship side and the financial side. And like Dave said, we'll be there. We'll be available to answer questions. There's hands-on component with the stockmanship. So you'll get out on stock as we discuss these principles and concepts. And that's basically what the school is going to be. The stockmanship side of it will be around these 12 principles and the techniques and how to apply them and why they work, and, you know, all of the questions that people may have about how to start doing this stuff. And then to have Dave there to help with the stockmanship. And then, of course, you know, what he brings in terms of all the knowledge on the financial end it's going to be a great school. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Dave, you might have mentioned this, but where do they get me information? How do we get it? And I'll put a link in the show notes where they can go to, but where, if they're wanting to go or to know more information, how do they find it?
The best place to go would be the Ranching for Profit workshop, the Ranch Management Consultants workshop. We have this there under the events page.
Okay. I will put a link in the show notes on that as well.
Thank you. Just for clarification, people will be arriving July 9th. It's pretty remote. The location is, although remote, it's a guest ranch that is a really nice place with some of the best food. They've got an excellent cook up there. Cost for the school is $2,000. That includes lodging, food, and the tuition. So all you got to do is get yourself there. And I think it's pretty reasonably priced for continuing education stuff, especially in today's market.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Well, I know we could go a whole nother show and then into some other things, but I think for today, we've gotten a good conversation here today. Dawn, thanks for joining us. Dave, also appreciate you being on there as well. Good to visit with you guys.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Hey, again, just to reiterate that information regarding the Stockmanship School and the Ranching for Profit workshop that our guests today, Don Hnatow and Dave Voth, will be facilitating. That's at the Cottonwood Guest Ranch in Wells, Nevada, July 9th through the 13th. Now, everybody's set to get there on the 9th with the workshop beginning on July 10th. If you'd like more information or to register, give Mackenzie a call at the Cottonwood Ranch, 775-472-0222. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Thanks for joining us. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.